but welcome everyone. Another data-driven session, first one in January. Lauren, you've got a really interesting topic today. Reimagine, redesign, reinvent. Tableau Makeover. Do you
Yeah,
want
like a
to
Makeover Monday on Wednesday.
yeah, do you want to describe what you've got for us today?
Yeah, so I have a workbook that I published in like 2022 that's based on public data. I want to revisit something that I made, a couple of years ago
Yeah.
that isn't featuring, the latest version of features and whatnot in Tableau. And just to show you don't have to recreate the wheel. You can go back and use something that you've already created.
Oh, pretty cool. Okay, that's awesome. Well, I'll skip a few slides here, but um, Lauren, you've been a part of a handful now, and through this year, you'll be on these data-driven events. So we're happy to have you back. Just a reminder that this is a webinar, obviously, and if you do have questions, which we always encourage, you can use a chat window, or you can come off the mute if you'd like and ask a question. I'll monitor that for you, Lauren, but please feel free to come off of mute. Lauren, you've got over 7 years experience with Tableau. So really excited to have you talk about today. I think we could probably jump right into a live demo if you're ready to share.
Yeah, sounds good.
Great. Okay, let me stop sharing. 1 second. Trying to find a Zoom window. Okay, Lauren, it is all you.
Okay, so we'll start with the original. And when I first looked at this, I was like, whoa, I've come a long way. Which is also a nice exercise. We all put a lot of effort into learning and trying to make the best reports we can or dashboards that we can. So it's nice to look back and see how far you've come in your journey. So yeah, this is the base. I used to work for the South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce. And this was one of the reports that I actually redesigned in Tableau. We had used Crystal reports, and I had to code in like HTML, and it was a mess. Here's the original. So yeah. Definitely looks better in Tableau, even this version. So I guess, and I'll bring it here. Usually when I start with a redesign, I'll go through the original and I'll make some notes. Not every time that I do it in here, but I'll just like have a notepad open and start writing down like, okay, what could I change to give myself some ideas of and refresh my own memory of what the data or what this report is originally designed to do. And I can open a couple of these that I have in mind, but if you guys have any, I can kind of open it up. So first impressions, what would you, based on all of our other sessions, what would you change here? Or what do you think is not following best practices?
On which chart? Yeah, go ahead. Someone have a comment?
Yeah, just on any of them.
Oh, I can think of a few. Anyone from the team? I mean, I think let's see. Let's see. I would think like, maybe donuts for the employment statistics would be interesting. Is
Yeah.
that a clear representation to visualize that data, open jobs, labor force population? Could those be combined in some way? It also seems like you have a metro area and region selected. Like, how do those relate? I'm sort of confused by that, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely not clear enough.
Yeah, right. Like clarity on that. Um,
Yeah, like maybe we could do a Vision tooltip here that could show you the list of the
yeah,
different counties within each
right,
metro area and like a breakdown.
right. Yeah, if there are any drill downs, just calling that out, right? Like, hey, you can click here and this action will take place. I
Right.
don't know if you have any drill throughs, but that would be interesting.
Yeah, I don't think I have it on. Oh, I have a filter.
Yeah,
One thing to call out though, which is funny, and this is sometimes it's really nice to go back after there's been like a newer release with updates because this is not using dynamic zone because when I built this, that wasn't a feature that was available yet. So I had to do the old school hacky select map filter, and then you use the parameter and
right.
you have to do a custom value list and it's a mess.
That's all I can think of right off the bat.
Yeah, sorry to put everyone on the spot, but the start of the year.
Maybe like separation between the worksheets. I mean, just having like a format. Are you using containers? Let me ask a question. Are you using containers in this dashboard?
Oh, good question. So I'm using containers in certain places, but not everywhere. And then
Okay.
I've also mixed tiled and floating,
Oh, okay. There you go.
which is
So
like,
that would not be a best practice.
right, exactly.
Although sometimes you have to, right? Sometimes you have to. So yeah, I would if I were to reconstruct it, I would think about putting everything in an appropriate container so that and that would help you get a nice fit and a separation, like a border almost between sheets that you have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
Yeah.
do some more padding and maybe
Right.
distribute evenly so it's all clean. And if I want to
Yeah.
swap different sheets, that'll be a lot easier if it's all
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
definitely containers.
Yeah.
And then the icons are a little bit dated
Yes. Yeah.
and they're not consistent.
Right.
Yeah, we need a better way to compare the counties and the metro areas.
Yes. Like the analytical part of it.
Right. And yeah, the tooltips would be good. I love a good Vision tooltip. That way you can save space and not lose insights.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and then we talked about DCV, dynamic zone visibility. And with dynamic zone, we could hide this when nothing is selected in particular. So if we click this, it would show you just Columbia, which doesn't really give you much, I feel like. So that was another thing. And then I think legends would also be a good thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Because right now we don't really know. I mean, these colors kind of match, but it's not super clear with how it's laid out. And the font weight and just sizing is not consistent with the headers and subheaders and titles and whatnot. Which I know sounds silly, but I'm like really involved with having to go through and change everything, but it's definitely worth it. It makes a huge impact. It's worth the front end work.
So how would you tackle this, Lauren? Would you, if you were gonna kind of rebuild this, what would you do?
So first, so yeah, I would go through, I'd make all these notes. Sorry, I don't know why that error has been popping up. So I go through and I would make notes. Then I would think about, all right, what actually matters? Because I feel like this is a little bit cluttered. So obviously our percentage, like our labor force and our population, and then the unemployment rate really matter. But what if I want to see, employment rate? Like, it might be helpful to have some different options, because right now the only option you have is either to select a metro area or county, and then it'll show you just up here and not down here, or statewide. But down here with the butterflies, which are cool, but I feel like we could get a lot more out of them if it was maybe a different chart type, which leads into which charts would be better to show instead of the ones that we have currently. Sorry, I'm going to pause for a second. So be thinking about different charts. I'm just going to restart this because it keeps popping up that error. When in doubt, close and reopen. That's like all the IT knowledge you need for Tableau sometimes. Okay. So let's start. So we've already made our notes and thought about what's important and what we need to change. So next I would do some different charts and just build out the sheets, and then we'll bring them into a new dashboard. I have a sample one, but let's go through some of these and then we can make some new charts as well. So I was thinking it'd be really cool right now. I've been making these, I've made a few of these now. And it's bringing in all the things that I was talking about before that I would want. So we have a parameter that we can change from county to metro area. And then we can change the metric as well. So we can see everything that we actually care about. Another nice thing is to have sets, because we had that top and bottom before. So if I just say, for this one, I said I just want the top 10 of whatever metric percentage, which would be this metric that we select. Because sometimes, I mean, there's 45 counties in South Carolina. So that's kind of a lot for these. But yeah, you can see the ones that have the highest unemployment, for example, or employment. And then I made this viz in tooltip to where we have that map still, but now it's showing you when you hover over where that county is within the state map, as well as the metro area, how that's laid out in the state map. You can see those counties within it. And this is another one that I've been making, and this is on my Tableau Public. So if anyone wants to reuse my gauge charts, you can just plug in your data and it'll work. So yeah, this is another one I feel like is useful, because now instead of that donut, we just get this gauge where we have these different layers, especially when you're trying to compare parts of a whole, but kind of broken out more, so it's easier to see. And I feel like this is visually a lot cleaner in general. And instead of a traditional legend, a nice option is to just dynamically color your text. So I'm saying, our labor force is this green color, greenish blue, and then the population overall, which is our total, is gray. And the blue would be our metric that we selected, or the employed. And same for the unemployment. Then I made another new map so that we can filter still by that map, but using dynamic zone features instead of the previous version features. So I guess, let's see. Those are a few options, but these are kind of, I mean, these are kind of crazy. So I guess some other ones, like what we've done in previous sessions, we could look at maybe building some bars or a table for a download. I guess, are there any charts that you guys think would be good right here? Or that you'd like to see like built out? Because we could make some more donuts.
But I think it'd be interesting, you know, as you thought about the edits, like how you would like starting from scratch with a new dashboard might be interesting. Like using the containers and maybe talk a little bit about how reiterate how zone visibility is set up and maybe try that.
Yeah, we can do that. So let
So I
me,
think, yeah, I think that'll be, and I always harp on the importance of containers and you're really knowledgeable about that and just how, because you did this in what, 2021? Or how long ago was it?
I think it was 2022.
22, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious to see you work and how you would put this together, how your mind would sort of compile all the sheets that are you have with some edits that you made and how it would come to life with how you operate nowadays.
Okay. Yeah, no, I like that. So in that case, I could either, there's like two routes that I'll go. I'll duplicate the existing one and then I'll just swap out the sheets, which is a really cool trick for that. If you just select a sheet in the dashboard, first let me duplicate. And I'll get rid of all these nodes. Or a few of them. Okay, so if you select one of these, then you go up to a sheet that's not on the dashboard currently, like this radial bars, and you select this swap sheets. This is a really easy way just to put in a new sheet in the dashboard. So if you had a bunch of different charts built out and you were kind of playing with your general layout, how would this chart look instead of the radial instead of the butterfly? And that's a really easy way just to swap them out instead of trying to drag it in and then it ends up in the wrong container and it can get really crazy. So yeah, that's a good tip if you want to duplicate what you already have, the layout, you're already good with the layout. But if we're going to start from scratch, which honestly with this one I did. Generally, I size it as 1300. It kind of depends, but I'd say 1300 by 900 is pretty standard, or by 1000 if you need it to be a little bit longer. And that usually looks good when you're publishing. If this is going to be something that when you download, you're going to put it into a PowerPoint, then I would stick with the PowerPoint sizing that's already in there. Because then that fits into the slides a bit better when you're exporting. But I'll stick with that 1300. So then before I bring out any of the sheets that I've built, I'll bring out an initial horizontal container. I'll put in a text object, and then I'll format this later. But I'm just going to say title. Then to get the date, or if you wanted like an updated date, the best way to do that, and we can combine it with our title, because the fewer sheets you have, the more performant your dashboard's going to be. So it's good to try to combine things when you can. So we'll call this title. This data is only from November of 2021, so I'll put this in text. If you have many like multiple dates, or you want to see like a range, so then that would take like more filters, or you'd add in the date twice and then we'd format accordingly. But this only has one date, so we'll just do max of the date, entire view. Then I'll go into text and I'll say our title. And now I will do some more formatting. Usually for the title, I do a medium font weight at about 14 or more, just depending on the size of the dashboard. And then I make sure that my subtitle is about 2 or 3 points less than that, just so it doesn't stand out as much. And I'll make that regular. And we want this to be centered. Nice. So now we have a dynamic title sheet. If you want it to actually say the date, though, we can go in and format that date. And this is where I would do month. Yeah, the 4 M's will like, they'll spell out the whole month. And day. And then year, I think. And I always get this confused. Yep. Needs to be on the pane. There we go. So now we have November 2021. You could add something in the tooltip, but I usually don't for the title. So now if we take that title sheet and we put it in our horizontal container, we can remove that other one. Now we have our title in our container. I'll just kind of put it up here for now. If you have logos that you don't know where the image is anymore, like me, then you can just go, so you select the image on your old dashboard, that object, and you hit like Control C or Command C. And then you go back to this dashboard and you hit Control V or Command V. So we'll do that here. Since I want both of these to be the same size though, and we're thinking about containers, and do this again. I'm actually going to add another container that we're going to nest and bring in. If you do Shift, then select and drop it in there. It'll tile it within that container if it's floating. If it's already tiled, you can just drag it in there. Then shift again, we're going to put it in this container. We'll distribute that evenly. And then we can, I think with the size of these, I had it at 100. Yeah. So now we have that. Depending on what I'm feeling, I'll use a gradient background, or it could be like an image, or you could create something on Figma and then layer that in the background. For now, I'll just do a gradient. So I inserted that image, I tiled it behind everything else. So we are going to do some floating and tiled mixed, but we're going to tile everything into one floating container, except for that image that's the background. And that's how you get a background image, or like a gradient color background. And we'll format this sheet so that it doesn't have that color behind it. All right, I have my first level set up. So next, I'm going to do another container. It's going to be floating. And I like to start with that. If I have sections of containers, I like to bring those out separately and work on them. And then at the very end, I'll have a massive container that I combine everything into. It just makes working with containers a little easier, because sometimes if you bring an object, like if I tried to put another container into this blank container, it gets absorbed, and it's kind of hard to bring in a new object and make sure that it's in the right container. Yeah, like if I wanted that object in the first container, it's not going to tile correctly. Whereas if I have this one, I put in a blank object, I put in another container, now these are separated. So I can put things in here while still maintaining the parent container. And you don't have to do that, but I found that that's like the fastest way to get containers to cooperate. So let me get rid of that for now. Go back to floating. For these, I'm going to have them separated out. We'll do like these radial bars can be one section. And if we want to put a dynamic title in there, we can do it within the title of this. Or if you want it to line up with like filters, I would have another horizontal container within that container. Then we'll do some text. Because I'm using parameters, it makes it a bit easier. And I'll say the metric by the level. So those two. And since that's within its own, we can then add in these filters. And you got to be careful where you drop it. So now we have all of this because it relates to that graph. Another thing to note is that just because you bring out a horizontal container does not mean that you have to lay the chart elements or any objects out horizontally. It switches as soon as you put more than one object in. So if I did blank and then blank vertically, the horizontal container became a vertical container. The next one, let's bring in that map. We'll format this so that we don't have background. Don't need that other blank object. This one we don't have any filters for, but if we were to just kind of follow the same layout as the other one, I think is the best way to do it. We can have another title. So we'll just say map for now. We'll come back to it. And as you're laying things out, it's fine if you put in like test or sample or, just some random text in there, just so you can revisit it towards the end when you're actually going through and making sure everything's working and everything is formatted consistently. Another thing with this one, since this is a filter, a lot of times I'll make a sheet that's an icon or info icon. So I'll go to shape, and it doesn't have to be a real field. So I'll just double click into the marks and do the quotes and write a random string. I just put info. Then if we go to shapes, I think I had some of these loaded. And I went through that on a previous session. Basically, if you make any custom shapes in PowerPoint or Figma, or you just download them from a Google image search, if you save it in your Tableau repository shapes folder, then it'll come up. You just have to reload it if you already have Tableau open. Then you can reload and have access to any custom shapes that you want. So in this case, I'm just going to do info. Usually I'll make sure that the buttons are within the same color palette, which is really easy in PowerPoint and Figma. Let's try this one. Entire view. Yeah, so we'll make this entire view. Then anything you want to put in the info icon when someone hovers over, you can put here. So I'll say like click to filter by. And since this map is going to change when I change that parameter for the radial bar level, which would be our metro area versus our county, I'll put that text in there so that it's dynamic. Okay, so now we have our info icon instead of putting another filter bar in there. We'll format that. We don't want the worksheet to have a background. Nice. And this is a good way, since we have everything floating but in their own little sections, before we put it into one massive container, we can kind of see, oh, would the map look good here? Would it look better over here? And you can do that once they're tiled too. It's just a little bit easier to move it around when it's floating initially. And the next one, we're going to follow the same practice. But, oh, so if you want to if you're going to have every element laid out in a similar way, then you can bring out that container, bring in a blank object. Do the same thing with bringing out another container. Putting in text, so title. This is within that container. And then if we just bring a blank object in there, it'll maintain. So it'll be easier to drop more objects in as you go. Then we can take this whole thing, copy it, paste it. And if you do that for the number of charts that you have, then you won't have to like do that whole process of bringing it out every time. This is a good time saver. So next are our gauges. So I'll hide that title because we're going to have a title. And same for the other one. And we can remove that placeholder blank. Oh, and this was the Viz and tooltip sheet. So yeah, if you find that you added the wrong visual, select that, go over to swap sheets. And that was a lot easier than trying to bring it in again and or take it away, and then the containers get all crazy. So now we have our 4 main sheets. So next I would try to figure out, I know that this doesn't necessarily relate to this. So I'm going to bring that over here. I mean, they all relate, but I really want the map. So think about when you have different dashboard actions that you might be using or filters, which area is getting impact, or which charts are being affected by those or being controlled by those. So in this case, I want to be able to select a metro area or county and then filter these 2 charts, but leave my set of the top 10 kind of uninterrupted. So I'm going to put this one over here, and I'll put these 3 together over here. So to do that, I bring out another horizontal container, and so that it doesn't get absorbed, I'm going to put a blank in there. We'll have these new KPI gauges. Take that whole container, drop it in, and we'll do the same thing for this one. Now we select all those containers. We'll put them up here. We'll do another floating. This time we'll do a little vertical. Now I want the map to be in the same section as the gauges. So we'll take our map. I'll just put it at the bottom because I feel like these are our new KPIs. So we'll have those above. I usually have the KPIs towards the top. And we can go back through and make sure everything is sized correctly towards the end. So now we have this whole section handled. This is its own section. We can leave it alone for now. We'll put another blank. We're going to take this massive nest of containers, put that on the left. Then we'll take this container, put it on the right, and we can remove that blank that we had in there. Now we have all of our charts together and laid out how we want. So the final container is going to be this vertical. Put in that blank. We'll take the title that we made. Shift and drop that in. And we'll take this one, do the same thing. And when you're floating like this, if you go into, because we're going to float all of this over this gradient background. We'll do one. Yeah, I put it the X and Y position to 1 and 1. And then depending on the size of the dashboard, I'll subtract a couple points from the width and the height. So 1300 by 900 should be something like 1298 by 898. Awesome. So now it's fitting the whole view. We can take this out. The radial bars get a little weird. You have to make sure that they're padded correctly or else it looks like more of an oval. But that's just a radial bars thing. So if I select my title container, I'm going to say I usually do anywhere from like 80 to 100, depending on the size. I think this one, because we don't have too much real estate, there isn't as much of a premium on it, so we don't have as many visuals. I think 100 is fine, and that way we have a little more like buffer space. And if you notice with this container is 100, and even though this is centered, it's not really centered. We need to make sure that we have something on the end that's also, so it's all laid out consistently. So I'm just going to pop in a blank object and I'll set it to the same as what's on the left. So now it's centered. And we can make sure that all of our titles are also the same height. And I usually do about 30. We'll do that here. And same for this one. Another thing I like to do if I have a darker background, I will kind of put all these together and then I'll make this parent container white and then we change the opacity. You can kind of play around with this. I think I had it at 80 before. Yeah, so that's still coming through, but then not too much, especially if you have colors in your charts that are similar to the background color. They can kind of wash it out. So now I can set up, let's do, well, we can do the show hide container. So if I go back, actually, yeah, no, I'll just do it this way. So to start, and this will be using that dynamic zone. So to have a button, you can use those, the hide and show like on, here, let me unhide this. Oh. So yeah, if you select this container or any of these objects, you can do that add show hide button and it'll show and hide it. But it doesn't, let you like edit the alt text in there. So when you hover over, it's just kind of basic. Like I'll show you. So yeah, if I hover over, it just says hide horizontal container. If you rename the container, it'll say hide filters or something. But if I want to hide multiple things based on that at once, then dynamic zone is really the better way to go. So I'll make a sheet. I'll put a shape in there. In this case, I make this in Figma, just like the, the apple on and off. I set it to a max of 2 because I'll create a parameter where if we edit it, we'll say 1 or 2 for our dynamic zone. I'll DZ. And for all my dynamic zone calcs, I try to put DZ in there first, just so that when I need to look back through any of them or change anything, they're really easy to find. So how this is working is that we'll have 2 sheets. There's the on and the off. So the on one that we're on right now, it has the max of 2 because when we select it, it'll change the parameter to 2 so that we're turning them on. But when it's off, it'll change to 1. And I'll kind of go through that as well. Let me find our off button. Yeah, and here we have 1. I know we only have about 9 minutes left, so I'll go fast. If we bring these in, I'll just do floating horizontal. Bring those 2 buttons in. Then we'll go to dashboard actions. We don't have any on this sheet currently. You do change parameter action. And this will where we'll say like on. And for these, it automatically selects everything. But if you select the first one and then hit shift and then select the last one, you can untick everything at once, which is really nice, especially if you have a ton of sheets. So we'll select that off. We want it to change the on-off parameter. The source field is in there. No aggregation, and we can just keep the current value. We'll do the same thing for off. Shift, uncheck everything. And I may have done that backwards, so I'm going to go check. Yeah, this is the off one. That's okay, because you can edit. And then on. Okay, we don't want any aggregation. So we're good. Now we need to apply the dynamic zone. So if we go back here, we see that this one is on. And you do it over here too if it's. Yeah, so it's just the opposite. So if we select, this would be our on DZ. And then this one is going to be our off. And then it'll change as you would expect. So we can shift and we'll put this in this container. And we can apply it to both of these, or you could have put those in another container. But now if you select this icon, it'll turn them on or off. We can go ahead and take those titles away because they're not super descriptive. And let's make this, if we edit the width of this and it's like 50, oh, that's too small. And so yeah, we'd end up with being able to show and hide those with like a cool icon. And if we go back here, because what other dashboard actions do I want? Well, dashboard actions. I want to add that filter for the map. I call it map filter. We're going to select all of these, uncheck. We'll find our map. Then I want it applied to only the gauges. So we'll select these and unselect. Then okay. So now this, oh, and see, I was wondering why I was doing that. Another important step when you're doing those filters in the dashboard actions, make sure you hit select unless you want it in the menu, and then okay. So now those will change. And then from there, I just go through, I clean up, I make sure that the fonts are all consistent, the spacing and sizing is consistent. Like with this one. Make sure all of these containers are distributed evenly. That looks better. I would add padding where I need it. Like this needs to be a little shorter. Just say 30 and 30. Maybe add some overall padding as well.
It's quite an improvement, Lauren.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, and then
That's
this is the
good.
one that is actually done. So, I mean, it takes a little more time to go through and like clean up. But once you have everything in those containers as they should be, then it's really easy. So yeah, we went from this, which Tableau really doesn't like.
Yeah, it doesn't like that old version.
Yeah, it really doesn't, because that message is only popping up for the old version.
Right. That's really cool. Lauren, thank you. This is awesome. This is awesome.
Yeah,
We're right at time. I don't, yeah, we have probably a minute for any questions from the group if you want to chat or come off mute while you have Lauren. Yeah, I'll leave it open to the group. Okay. No questions. All right. Well, with that, guys, we'll let you get back to your Wednesday and we'll see you in a month in February.